Look, alright? I know that you don't care about the FIFA Club World Cup. I don't care, you don't care. It is well established at this point that absolutely no one cares. It is a very transparent cash grab by FIFA, who have long been envious of how lucrative the Champions League is for UEFA, and are keen to boost their own coffers by administrating a similar tournament. Oh no? Sorry? FIFA President Gianni Infantino has just given a speech at the Rose Bowl in California, where he has said that the true purpose of the Club World Cup is to inspire hope and joy in future generations. My sincere apologies. How cynical of me. Today, I feel like lying. In fairness, that is every day for Gianni. The football calendar may already be packed tighter than migrant workers in a Qatari slave labour camp in the build-up to the last World Cup, but not content with players dropping faster than government critics of FIFA's favourite regimes out of 12th-floor windows, World Football's governing body has come up with an ingenious solution. Let's just play a load more games. Again, in fairness, this is the solution every time. It hasn't worked yet. I mean, it seems to just keep on making the problem worse, but in the meantime, everyone who matters keeps getting richer, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters. A few ACL injuries and ruined careers here and there is a shame and all, but you can't muck about when it comes to the bottom line. That's actually FIFA's new motto. It used to be, for the game, for the world. Now it is, for Infantino, and his bottom line, the rest of you don't matter, fuck off peasants. It's not quite as catchy, admittedly, but it is certainly much more honest. Well, the reason we need to talk about the FIFA Club World Cup, despite no one caring about it, is because a club has been kicked out of it. Liga MX side Club León, for violating FIFA's rules relating to multi-club ownership, and they're not especially pleased about it. FIFA alleged that Club León are owned by the same people as fellow Liga MX outfit Pachuca, who also qualified for the 2025 Club World Cup. Because they are, but Club León argue that they aren't, even though they are, because everyone else who has argued that they weren't in the past, even when they obviously were, has gotten away with it. That's right, this is a battle, ostensibly, between FIFA and multi-club ownership, two of the most despised phenomenons in modern football. It's a bit like if Millwall played Hansa Rostock in a pre-season friendly, if the Ku Klux Klan formally waged a war with ISIS, or if Hitler and Russell Brand had an arm wrestle. We are talking about the worst of the worst. This is the Holocaust versus the Atlantic slave trade in a game of top trumps but for football. Can everyone lose? Can we put a glass over them both, slide a piece of paper underneath them, and then throw them outside like they're an unwelcome insect in the home? And then stamp on them repeatedly until they're turned into dust, because even the creepiest insects at least do some good. Say what you want about spiders, they are basically tiny monsters, aren't they? But at least they prey upon blood-sucking parasites. What good do FIFA and multi-club ownership models do? They are the blood-sucking parasites themselves. What we really need is a massive spider the size of Wembley Stadium to prey upon Gianni Infantino, Jim Ratcliffe, and the entire Emirati royal family. Is anyone working on that? As soon as they're finished baking that giant lasagna, I sincerely hope that is in the pipeline. Where was I? Oh yeah, the FIFA Club World Cup. We've got no option other than to talk about it at this stage. It is what it is. It's bigger than a glorified pre-season tournament now, so sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to the United States of America, the home of tariffs, via Mexico and Switzerland, as we take a look at the revamped Club World Cup that no one wants, why it is a team short before the tournament has even begun, and whether you ought to side with FIFA or multi-club ownership models in a battle between depravity and evil. The qualification process for the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup is very simple. It's basically the winners of the top confederation-wide club competition in each of the last 4 years, except in the case of the OFC, who only have one slot, which goes to the club with the highest OFC ranking that has won at least one of the last 3 OFC Men's Champions Leagues, with additional teams from UEFA and CONMEBOL, the 2 strongest confederations, determined by club ranking over a 4-year period, except there is a limit of just 2 teams per country, unless those teams are top confederation-wide club competition competition champions over the last 4 years, in which case there can be more than 2, but there can't be more than 2 just because they are the highest ranked teams within the Confederation over a 4-year period. Oh, and then there is an additional slot handed to the host nation, which was determined at a later date, and was given to Inter Miami, despite the fact that they have never won the CONCACAF Champions Cup, nor have they ever won the MLS Cup, which determines the champions of American football, American soccer, but they did win the Supporters' Shield in 2024, a less prestigious trophy for the team that tops the Major League Soccer table during the regular season, but which FIFA apparently values very, very highly indeed, and is ironclad grounds for a team to qualify for the inaugural FIFA Club World Cup under a new format, and it definitely doesn't have anything to do with them having Lionel Messi. Honestly, I am appalled by the mere suggestion. They won the Supporters' Shield for Christ's sake. That's like, arguably the 4th most important trophy on offer to clubs in the United States. It's just a surprise that they didn't find a spot for Wrexham in recognition of them reaching the round of 32 in last season's Bristol Street Motors Trophy. That sort of achievement really ought to be recognised. Oh, and then there's the fact that when it comes to FIFA's 4-year ranking, that isn't the same as each confederation's ranking of their own teams. Oh no. That would make far too much sense and would be way too easy to understand. FIFA, in their eternal wisdom, only recognise ranking points earned in the top confederation-wide cup competition, which, in some cases, can make quite a big difference. In terms of European qualification, for example, there was quite a lot of confusion as to how and why Red Bull Salzburg qualified for the Club World Cup. The club of secondary importance within the Red Bull cinematic universe only ranked 42nd in UEFA's coefficient rankings, below the likes of Barcelona, Bayer Leverkusen and Liverpool, none of whom qualified. Even excluding FIFA's 2 clubs per country limit, excluding confederation champions, Red Bull Salzburg still ranked below the likes of Club Brugge, Feyenoord, and Rangers in UEFA's coefficient rankings, and there are no clubs from Belgium, the Netherlands, or Scotland attending the Club World Cup. That is because Club Brugge, Feyenoord and Rangers, though, amassed most of their UEFA coefficient ranking points in the Europa League, which doesn't exist for qualifying purposes as far as FIFA are concerned, whereas Red Bull Salzburg have amassed more points than any of them in the Champions League, which does, so they qualified ahead of them. As I said, it is a very simple and straightforward qualification process. I really fail to see why anyone would have any difficulties understanding it. You're still thinking about that whole Inter Miami MLS Supporters Shield thing, aren't you? Look, it has nothing to do with Lionel Messi, alright? This is the last time that I will hear that malicious rumour be repeated on this channel. It's actually because FIFA were desperate to have the great Ryan Saylor appear at the Club World Cup. Whatever you think of the criteria for qualification, or the lack thereof, there can be no doubt that Mexican side Club León met it as winners of the 2023 CONCACAF Champions League, now known as the Champions Cup. Understandably excited about appearing at a tournament alongside the likes of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, Club León went on a shopping spree ahead of their Club World Cup bow. They brought in Chilean international Rodrigo Echevarria from Hurricane, Uruguayan international Nicolas Fonseca from River Plate, and, most notably of all, Colombia legend James Rodriguez from Rayo Vallecano. Age 33, Rodriguez's career has stalled at the highest level ever since a failed move to Everton 5 years ago, but he reminded everyone of what he can do at the 2024 Copa America, in which he made the team of the tournament and won the Golden Ball as Colombia's star man, 10 years after lighting up the World Cup in Brazil. It was his performances in Brazil, you may recall, that earned Rodriguez a very big money move to Real Madrid, and the Colombian hoped that the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup could provide him with a similar shop window in order to impress potential suitors. Club León, meanwhile, wanted a marquee signing that they could parade at the Club World Cup, and who could ignite the fuse in them with individual match-winning ability against some of the world's biggest clubs. After all, there is big money on offer at the Club World Cup, especially for clubs who can do well, as we will come on to. This was a transfer almost entirely predicated, therefore, on Club León appearing at a tournament that they have now been booted out of. Mexico legend Andres Guardado, meanwhile, who is the nation's most capped player of all time and the 9th most capped player from any country of all time, retired from football in November 2024, but reversed his decision, age 38, in order to have one last dance with León at the FIFA Club World Cup. That decision also now looks to be a little bit awkward, with León disqualified, and Rodriguez and Guardado, bona fide legends for their countries and the sport, left with pie on their shirts.
The goalie has got football pie all over his shirt.
FIFA were all set on Club León appearing at the Club World Cup, so much so that they literally carved their name, along with the other 31 participating clubs, onto the trophy. There's a master engraver somewhere out there who is about to earn an absolute fortune for his skills to remove that. It was Costa Rican side Liga Deportiva Alajuelense who threw a spanner in the works of FIFA's first Club World Cup under a new format, filing a complaint that Club León's ownership situation violated FIFA rules. When FIFA sat on their hands for a little bit too long, Alajuelense threatened to file a further complaint with the Court of Arbitration for Sports. No one wants those guys involved. They are like the high priests of football, congregating in a big monastery somewhere in Luzerne, I imagine. So FIFA leapt into action, announced that they had consulted their own rules and, yes, in fact, Alajuelense were right. They actually gave Club León a brief period of time to provide satisfactory evidence that they didn't share an ownership with fellow Liga MX side Pachuca, who also qualified for the Club World Cup as 2024 and therefore reigning CONCACAF Champions Cup winners, something which was very difficult for León to do, because they do. Club León's claim was, and still is, that although the company which owns León and Pachuca is the same, namely Grupo Pachuca, the clubs have entirely separate and independent governing structures, administrators and executives, therefore eliminating any risk of match fixing or any kind of conflict of interest which would pose a threat to the integrity of the Club World Cup. This is essentially the legal loophole that lots of multi-club ownership models have used around the world. UEFA, for example, ostensibly prohibit multi-club ownership within the organisation's competitions, but when Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig both qualified for the Champions League in 2017, very obviously both owned by Red Bull, they literally put it in their names, or at least tried to in Leipzig's case, as well as on their badges and nicknaming themselves the Red Bulls. Seriously, you could hardly wish for a more obvious example of shared ownership, unless two clubs who qualified for the Champions League were actually both called "We are part of the same multi-club ownership model FC," but when that case arose, the UEFA Club Financial Control Body launched a rigorous investigation. Honestly, it was so rigorous. You can hardly believe how rigorous it was. I'm not even sure that investigations this rigorous ought to be legal. They practically treated Red Bull like detainees at Guantanamo Bay who, as we all know, have no human rights. UEFA concluded that Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig had to clearly demonstrate a separation of powers between them in order for the two clubs to be allowed to compete in the same competition. Issues that raised suspicion among UEFA included the high volume of loans and transfers between Salzburg and Leipzig, the similarities in terms of their branding, and the fact that they were both owned by Red Bull. Cheers, Poirot. Nothing getting past you, is there? As I said, this was a rigorous investigation. UEFA was ultimately satisfied that Salzburg and Leipzig had illustrated a clear separation, and of course, there haven't been loads of transfers between the two clubs since then, nor is there still a great big red pair of honking bulls on the front of both clubs' shirts and on their logos. Oh no, wait. That's right, isn't it? What Salzburg and Leipzig did change was board members and administrators, removing any direct cross-involvement of personnel at the two clubs, which UEFA deemed to be enough to illustrate that there was no conflict of interest when it came to, quote, matters that affect the performance of a club in a competition and not simply generic corporate, commercial, financial, or other business activities which do not directly affect sporting performance. End quote. Sure enough, the following season, Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig didn't just compete in the same UEFA competition, the UEFA Europa League, they were drawn in the very same group. Salzburg won the group, winning all 6 games, including a double against Leipzig, who were dumped out in the group stage, and to prove, once and for all, that there really were no ties between the two clubs, honestly Gov, none at all, Leipzig went and signed 3 players from that Salzburg team, including Dominik Szoboszlai and Amadou Haidara. But they did it in a very satisfactory way, and really, that is what matters. Since then, Manchester City and Girona have competed in the same Champions League season, despite both being owned by the City Football Group. AC Milan and Toulouse have both competed in the same Europa League, despite both being owned by Red Bull Capital Partners. And PSG and Newcastle United have both competed in the same Champions League group, despite both being owned by despotic and tyrannical dictators. Admittedly, different ones, so that is a separate issue, but you get the general idea. UEFA has basically given a big fat thumbs up to multi-club ownership models, or more accurately, turned a blind eye to them, which have exploded in popularity since being pioneered by Tottenham owners ENIC, somewhat ironically, given that Spurs are now one of few super clubs that don't sit at the apex of a so-called MCO. It is well established at this point that multi-club ownership is becoming more and more common, but I don't think that a lot of people are fully aware of just how rampant it has already become. My dad, for example, who is a big Hull City fan, but who I would describe as more of a casual football fan in general, not in the sense that he wears Stone Island and likes getting in scraps, although that too, of course, but in the sense that he follows the sport quite casually, recently asked me how many multi-club ownership models there actually were on the way to a Hull City game. By the time that we arrived at the MKM Stadium, I was still listing them, and he was wishing that he'd never asked. Whilst almost everyone knows about Red Bull, the City Football Group and Jim Ratcliffe, the OGs, the Death Star, and the Coco the Clown of multi-club ownership models, fewer people know about John Textor's Eagle Football Holdings, which owns Lyon, Botafogo, Molenbeek, and part owns Crystal Palace, Blueco, which owns both Chelsea and Strasbourg, and 777 Partners, who owns Standard Liège, Red Bull Paris, Vasco da Gama, although their majority stake there is currently under suspension, Hertha Berlin, and a minority stake in Sevilla. And even fewer still know about the Friedkin Group, who recently beat 777 Partners to the acquisition of Everton, as well as owning Italian giants Roma, Saputo Inc., which owns both Serie A high flyers Bologna, and MLS basement boys CF Montreal, or even the fact that the Qatar Sports Investments don't just own PSG, but are also now the largest shareholders in Portuguese Primeira Liga club Braga, as well as having attempted to take over Malaga. Almost everywhere you look now, there is some form of multi-club ownership going on. In the Premier League alone, Aston Villa's owners also part-own Vitória in Portugal, Real Unión in Spain, and have formal partnerships with clubs in Egypt and Japan. Bournemouth owner Bill Foley also owns New Zealand's Auckland FC, as well as part ownership stakes in Hibernian in Scotland and Lorient in France. And Brighton's Tony Bloom was the majority shareholder at Belgian outfit Royal Union Saint-Gilloise, until Union qualified for the Europa League in the same season as Brighton, at which point he became a minority shareholder, with his right-hand man Alex Muzio, who was born in Brighton and has worked for him for almost 20 years now, becoming majority shareholder instead. That, again, apparently satisfied UEFA's rules relating to multi-club ownership. By my estimate, 14 out of the 20 current Premier League clubs are involved in at least some kind of multi-club ownership model, and of the 6 that currently aren't, at least 4 of them either previously have been or are actively involved in trying to establish one at this moment in time. In other words then, basically everyone in the division. I mean, heck, as I covered in a recent video, one of the biggest investors in Red Bull Capital Partners, who own AC Milan, Toulouse, and a minority stake in Liverpool, is Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who, through his Abu Dhabi United Group and then the City Football Group, is also the majority shareholder at Manchester City. That means that the 2 most successful and competitive teams in English football over the last decade actually have, albeit only on a minority level in one instance, a degree of shared ownership. Whilst competing in the same European competitions creates potential conflicts of interest, what we don't tend to see in Europe, that case notwithstanding, is teams with the same owners competing in the same domestic divisions. That is not the case in Mexico, who take one look at Europe's multi-club ownership models, laugh, take a big old swig of tequila, tilt their sombreros, and ask with a wry smile, "Is that the best you've got?" In Liga MX, just 3 companies own 1/3 of the division's clubs. So, Grupo Caliente, which is a bookmakers and casino, own both Club Tijuana and Querétaro in Liga MX, in addition to Dorados de Sinaloa, who were formerly managed by Diego Maradona, outside of the top flight. Grupo Orlegui own both Santos Laguna and Atlas in Liga MX, in addition to Sporting Gijon in Spain's Segunda Division, and of course, Grupo Pachuca own both CF Pachuca and Club León, in addition to Real Oviedo in Spain, Everton de Viña del Mar in Chile, and Club Atlético Atenas de San Carlos in Uruguay. In Mexico, these arrangements are referred to not as multi-club ownership models, but as multipropiedad, a term which is sometimes translated into English as timeshare, and which isn't exclusive to football. Their prevalence within Liga MX, though, a league which has been dreadfully mismanaged, despite having a huge amount of interest and money running through it, playing a large part in Mexico's continued underachievement on the world stage, has long been a bone of contention among Mexican football fans. Broadly speaking, multipropiedad has been a disaster for Mexican clubs. Querétaro and Santos Laguna, owned by Caliente and Orlegui, are bottom and second bottom in this season's Apertura, with Puebla, who are owned by Grupo Salinas and Santos Laguna both on the brink of elimination, and fellow Grupo Orlegui and Salinas clubs, Atlas and Mazatlan, also in crisis. Grupo Pachuca duo Pachuca and León have been the exception to the rule, therefore, in enjoying significant success within a multi-club ownership model, but even Pachuca are third from bottom in the Apertura this season, and León are only 11th. What's more, even when things don't go terribly, as has been the norm for at least one, if not every club involved in a multi-propiedad model, the dubiousness of the arrangements and the obvious conflicts of interest breed resentment. Within the Grupo Pachuca multi-propiedad structure, for example, the one which has caused all of the controversy relating to the Club World Cup, the perception among almost everyone is that Pachuca are the group's priority, and León more of an afterthought. That's not just because the group is literally called Grupo Pachuca, although that is an inconvenient fact, which isn't lost on any León fans. The Grupo Pachuca multi-propiedad came about as the result of a billionaire family dispute. No, seriously. Jesus Martinez Patino is the family patriarch and the president of CF Pachuca, but his son, Jesus Martinez Marvilla, wasn't content with taking a backseat role within the family's football operations. He wanted to call the shots himself, so his daddy bought him his own toy, Club León, where Marvilla could be allowed to pull the strings and be in control. In 2010, Martinez Marvilla became the president of Club León after his father's group acquired the club at just 28 years of age. He has been in charge ever since, and within the basket case that is Liga MX at times, Club León have, for the most part, actually become one of the division's better run clubs. Nonetheless, when it comes down to it, Patino is the big boss, which means that his club, Pachuca, will always be top dogs within the Grupo Pachuca hierarchy. No one appears to be quite clear as to why it is Club León, who have been kicked out of the FIFA Club World Cup, as opposed to CF Pachuca, when both are owned by Grupo Pachuca and León actually qualified first, having won the CONCACAF Champions League before Pachuca. One suggestion is that Grupo Pachuca effectively nominated León as being their club which would be axed, voluntarily. If one had to be, obviously they would prefer it to be neither of them, so Pachuca got off scot-free. Whereas UEFA's rules prohibiting multi-club ownership in the same competition proved to be incredibly weak and easily avoided, this is the first test of FIFA's rules, which have, technically, been long established, but have never really been put to the test before because this is the first 32-team FIFA Club World Cup, with more than one team from each confederation. That poses the question, how would FIFA react if, say, 2 Red Bull, City Football Group, or Bluecoat clubs qualified for the Club World Cup? Would they be tougher than UEFA? Would they buckle when the MCO was a bigger and more powerful one than Grupo Pachuca? Or would they just make up their own whole set of new rules as they went along and say that it's absolutely fine now? It's the last one, isn't it? It's definitely the last one. This is a slight tangent, I know, not like me, but there is also the unusual problem, whispered quietly in some corners of the football world, of Major League Soccer's unusual ownership situation. MLS clubs aren't private or even publicly owned enterprises, as is the case elsewhere in the world. Instead, they are franchises whose owners effectively buy into Major League Soccer like shareholders, meanwhile the clubs or franchises themselves are collectively owned by the league. Technically, therefore, every Major League Soccer team has the same ownership situation. They are all owned by Major League Soccer. Whether anyone will ever raise a complaint and open up that can of worms with FIFA and CAS remains to be seen. Costa Rican club Alajuelense, who brought the complaint against Pachuca and Leon's joint participation in the Club World Cup, most likely did so not out of a principled opposition to multi-club ownership or a passion for seeing FIFA's rules be strictly implemented, you will be surprised to discover, but because they hoped to profit from one of the two clubs being kicked out. Alajuelense were, at the time, the highest ranked team in CONCACAF coefficient rankings in terms solely of CONCACAF Champions Cup points outside of Mexico and the United States. Since, even in Leon's absence, both Mexico and the United States would still meet FIFA's non-champion 2-club per country limit, they hoped that they would be next in line for an invitation, given that Club World Cup participation is worth a minimum of $9.55 million as an entry fee for CONCACAF clubs before any performance-related bonuses. That would be a pretty huge cash injection for a Costa Rican club. Unfortunately for Alajuelense, FIFA interpreted their own qualification rules slightly differently to them. I mean, who'd have thought it? As far as FIFA are concerned, in Club León's absence, there's no problem with a third Mexican or American club filling the void, which is why they have overlooked Alajuelense entirely and are trying to set up a qualification playoff game between LAFC and Club América. The logic there, according to FIFA, is that LAFC were CONCACAF Champions League finalists in 2023, losing against Club León over a two-legged final. Meanwhile, Club América are the highest-ranked team according to the CONCACAF coefficient rankings. If you're allowing American and Mexican clubs, that is the first hurdle, I actually think that they are fairly reasonable inclusions. Certainly, it is less brazen than inviting one of Barcelona, Manchester United or Al Nassr, three clubs who were actually floated at one stage. Nonetheless, critics point to some ulterior motives as to why FIFA might want one of LAFC or Club América to be present at the tournament, as opposed to, let's say, Alajuelense. The Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, is one of the host venues for the Club World Cup, so having a Los Angeles club participate in the tournament would provide a welcome boost for FIFA, who are having one or two issues shifting tickets at exorbitant prices. Meanwhile, Club América are widely considered to be North America's biggest club in terms of their overall fan base. Their support would likely travel in their numbers to follow their team, and, perhaps most significantly of all, they are owned by Televisa, one of the largest broadcasters in Latin America. Sourcing broadcast deals for what is effectively a brand new tournament had proved to be a real challenge for FIFA, which was causing them significant organisational headaches. Revenue generated through broadcasting was required to finance the entire tournament, including prize money, participation fees, and things like sourcing appropriate training facilities and operational bases for 32 football clubs and all of their staff. Without it, they couldn't provide the necessary assurances that would bring especially Europe's biggest and richest clubs to the table, who could make more money going on more lucrative and less arduous pre-season tours all of their own, and without the likes of Man City, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, the prestige of a Club World Cup, if not the entire premise, would collapse before the tournament had even begun. It was very convenient, therefore, that FIFA were able to strike a $1 billion global broadcast deal with the loss-making UK-headquartered streaming service DAZN, after which they immediately announced that the Club World Cup prize money would be worth $1 billion, split roughly half and half between participation and performance-related bonuses, including as much as $125 million for the winning club. For all of their moaning about fixture congestion and scheduling all season, when it comes down to it, that is just about enough to get Europe's big boys on board. Interestingly, the deal with DAZN, which industry insiders have described as being much higher than ordinary market value, with few other broadcasters reported to have expressed serious interest, came just 3 days before DAZN announced that Surge Sports Investments, a group owned by Saudi Arabia's state-owned public investment fund, had invested, you'll never guess, $1 billion in DAZN. That news came just a couple of months after Saudi Arabia won the right to host the 2034 World Cup unopposed. Saudi Arabia also hosted the 2023 FIFA Club World Cup, the last Club World Cup before the format change, and is widely anticipated to host again in 2033 in the build-up to hosting the World Cup. This stuff is so tedious and predictable at this point that I get bored of talking about it, but someone has to, and predictable as it may be, we ought not become totally desensitized to it. DAZN, following the $1 billion investment in them by the Saudi state and their $1 billion investment in the FIFA Club World Cup, began subcontracting rights out to the likes of ESPN in Brazil, Mediaset in Spain and Italy, and TNT Sports in the United Kingdom and in the US. There are still lots of countries and regions without rights deals though, and that includes Mexico, which is a huge market, along with all of North America, outside of the United States. The inclusion of Club América in the Club World Cup, therefore, as North America's biggest club owned by a Latin American broadcasting giant, would present a welcome development for both FIFA and DAZN. All of these things are complicated by just how close the 2025 Club World Cup now is. The tournament is set to start in a little over 2 months' time, meanwhile Club León are not taking their exclusion without a fight. If FIFA remove León through fear of the case reaching CAS, it hasn't helped them, as León have launched an appeal with CAS. That hearing, and therefore any ruling, won't be heard until the beginning of May at the earliest, as little as 5 weeks before the start of the Club World Cup. León hope that they can get a positive result in the courts before the playoff between LAFC and Club América can be held. What that means for LAFC and Club América in terms of planning their own schedules, it's not quite clear, but the whole thing is evidently a bit of a mess, and it's not the only mess heading into this tournament. Many clubs still haven't resolved their training and operational bases in the United States ahead of the tournament, with some colleges and sports teams complaining that FIFA's terms aren't acceptable to them. As a result, a number of clubs have bypassed FIFA's own program, going directly to the colleges and teams themselves to strike their own deals, for which FIFA will reimburse them to the tune of $15,000 a day during the group stage. There is arguably no moral superiority to be found in the battle between FIFA and a multi-club ownership model created because a Nepo baby and his dad couldn't agree on how to run a club, so they decided to buy another one. That is how I began this video. But in reality, that's not what this is about. You don't have to pick a side. The fact of the matter is that all of the major players in football now are wretched, self-interested, super-rich crooks. Multi-club ownership models are only becoming more ubiquitous. Soon every club in the world will be owned by about 5 different companies, centi-billionaires or nation-states. And FIFA is only becoming more brazen in its villainy, if such a thing were even possible. Still, it's good news about the massive Wembley-sized spider they're working on, isn't it? That really can't come soon enough. Whilst there may be no moral authorities in football anymore, the fact that FIFA had to be reminded of their own rules, and then forced to implement them, is clearly absurd. It's not as though Club León or CF Pachuca's ownership situations weren't widely known, and there are now Club León supporters who have paid for flights to and hotels in the United States to, as things stand, watch a team that will no longer compete in the Club World Cup. If nowhere else, that seems like a reasonable place for your sympathies to lie. On the bright side, had they gone to America this summer, there is always the chance that they would be wrongly arrested, detained, and then deported to a maximum security prison camp in El Salvador on suspicion of being a gang member, owing to a Club León tattoo or having the wrong shade of skin, so, perhaps Alajuelense and FIFA have spared them of that fate. I find it's always nice to end on a positive note. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, I sincerely hope that was the case of course. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you're subscribed, and have notifications turned on not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my personal channel, or second channel, Alfie Potsama, which is imminently, and I really do mean that this time, about to get its 5th video. I have recently got back from the Netherlands, and I think that it's going to be quite good, so, If that's not reason enough to subscribe, I don't know what is. You can also find me on various social media platforms and elsewhere on the internet via all of the links that you will find in the video description down below, but more importantly, go out and have a brilliant day. Cheers.